Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Bosch Legacy Season 1, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the fact is our boy Willie Datz gets got in prison, and now everything ends up falling on Chandler because of her saying, like, oh yeah, my boy Raul is going to, like, take care of you if you don't help me out. So I think that's kind of fascinating. And now the FBI are showing up at her, and it's like, it is an interesting thing. Like, I love this. Like, oh yeah, we're just inferring, or we're just almost like they were saying, like, oh, we're spitballing theories. It's like, how you gonna claim to still be spitballing, like, just, it's just conjecture on your part when you specifically reference the people involved, the exact conversation that Chandler had with Datz. It's like, yeah, like, you could at least lie a little bit better. So now she's like, all right, watch out when they roll up on you, Bosch. But Bosch handles it. It's like, right, he dodges the questions, and then they're like, yeah, let's go for a ride. He's like, well, I can follow you. Like, no, get in the car with us. It's like, I find that so fascinating because it's like, for one, the only way they would have known the particulars of that conversation is if they were listening in on it. But even though Datz wasn't her client, it still would have been a situation of you're not supposed to listen to those conversations. I guess they're able to legally work around it because Willie wasn't her client, so there's no client privilege in that regard. But even Marty was still saying, like, yeah, if it ever goes to trial, like, that would kind of be stricken from the record. And she's like, I literally had nothing to do with this. And Marty's like, I'm kidding. She's like, geez, you almost had me there. But part of me wonders, will they try to run that and try to get Chandler on that? But she ends up talking to Raul later on. He said, like, he had nothing to do with that. Even he was impressed, like, yo, what did you tell Willie to get him to talk? It's like, I told him you owe me a favor. He's like, wow, slick, counselor. Yeah, but he's not planning on snitching, but he does drop information that the Brafa are the ones who took care of Datz. It's like, okay. So, because last episode I wondered, now that Carl was taken care of, would they be out of this whole situation? It's like, well, maybe not. Just because at least Datz was a loose end, which I guess shouldn't be too surprising because they knew that Datz ended up, I guess with their connections, they found out that Datz ended up talking to Chandler. I mean, we already know they killed Carl Rogers' lawyer, so killing Datz isn't that big of a deal. I don't think they'd come after Chandler because that'd be too much of an issue. I mean, Roger already put them in the spotlight when he went after killing a whole bunch of people, including a judge, and going after a lawyer like Chandler, so it's a little bit different. But I also like, too, that it's not just that. I mean, when it's all said and done, it seems like that's over with because it's like, yeah, the Brafa hired the hit. That might be the last we see of the Brafa, but they might, like, kind of pop up later on. But at the very least, when it comes to Chandler, she's still dealing with the aftermath of everything. Obviously, she has to still pretend like, oh yeah, Carl Rogers, he left. It's like, no, she knows he's dead. But even knowing he's dead, you would think it would bring her some comfort, but it doesn't. She feels like she's still not herself, and she worried, like, what if I'm so broken, I could never be me again? Because she was hoping that, now that he was taken care of, it would fill that void a little. But it's like, no, it's not the easiest thing to get back what he took from her. That safety and, because she'll always, like, yes, Carl's gone, but those scars will always be there, both, mentally and physically. And that's not going to be the easiest trauma to get over. And Chandler's the type of person who will always put up a brave front. She will never show people how she's really feeling. So I'm curious to see what ends up happening on that front, whether that, what it kind of means for her in the long run. Will she be able to get those? Will she eventually be able to get those pieces of herself back, or will it be a situation of finding a way to move forward as you are? You might not always be fully whole in that regard, but you're still alive and you can still push forward. So it's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front. On another front, we had the whole situation where they're looking into the guy who ended up shooting Paulina I believe that was last episode. Interestingly enough, another familiar face. We got Detective Bennett back, which I think the last time we saw her, wasn't she still Jimmy's partner the last time we saw her? And I think her and Edgar ended up breaking up, didn't they? I feel like that was the case. Do correct me in the comments down below. But nevertheless, they're looking into Sharp. And also, apparently, he's off with his girlfriend, which said girlfriend calls her mom. Is like, right, give us the money so that he can take the money and leave so I can come back home to my child. And the detective leading this whole task force he promised the mom, like, okay, we will try and make sure your daughter gets out of this okay. We will try and, like, make sure, promise that, she gets to come back home to your child. So do this not only for your daughter, but your granddaughter. And I don't know how much that lieutenant ended up bringing up that conversation. He probably had the conversation. Maybe. The fact is, it makes me a little uneasy because they didn't have the conversation on camera. Because by the time we cut back to, like, he's like, right. Because he's under the impression, like, oh, she's aiding and abetting. It's like, yeah, but the mom doesn't believe, like, she's guilty in all of this. It's just like she wants to come back home, get her daughter back home. He's like, okay, we'll try. But once again, we don't see those conversations on screen, so that's what makes me wonder, did he actually have that conversation with the cops? He just said, like, right, this is your positionings, we're going to take them down, but no conversation about, like, right, we're going to protect the daughter. So I don't think the lieutenant in charge had everyone's best, I didn't think he had her best interest at heart, because the way things played out, and I don't know police protocol, but to me, I'm like, wouldn't it have made more sense to get him the moment he was parked? Like, the fact is, I guess it makes sense because you didn't have officers in positions and stuff like that. The whole point was everyone's in position to block his path in case when he tries to take off. Like, that's the whole point. But I felt like the moment she didn't want to get in the car with him, the moment he was stopped, I felt like that would have been an opportunity. But I guess they didn't prepare enough just in case. But you knew that he might end up, I don't know, because she did walk up alone, so they had to wait for him to show up. But there was a good chance maybe he would have, like, if they rolled up, he would have taken off, and that would have turned into a whole situation. Still turned into a whole situation, too, so they end up crashing. The moment everyone's guns are trained on him, it's like, please don't, please don't. And apparently he's reaching for his gun. I don't know. And they end up lighting him up. And you're like, Jesus. You're like, and you could tell she's getting hit, too. You're like, no. That's, I'm like, once again, not knowing police protocol, I feel like, shouldn't you have done that before she got back in the car? That feels like that would have been the opportunity to strike. But once again, you didn't have anyone in position, but I still feel like that could have and should have gone a different way. Now that woman's daughter is going, and she was just someone, I think, mixed up with the wrong guy, got dragged into his nonsense. Now that child's going to grow up with her mother. It's just like, man, that sucks. So, I don't know. They also found something in his trunk. I don't know what that was. I don't know whether that was, like, cash, drugs, or whatever it was. Or there was something they found in the trunk, and they were just like, whoa. And we never got to find out what that was. Because Maddie, at the end of it all, does kind of have, like, this look on her face. Like, I guess she didn't want things to go down the way they did. Or maybe she's kind of getting the inkling, like, oh, things should have gone down differently. I'm also curious because there's another angle to Maddie's story, too, where we end up finding out that the Thai town rape situation that's going on, the rapist struck again, but the person ended up beating the crap out of him, and it turns out luchador mask, was it red and black or something like that, it's the same person that struck Prita. And she's talking to Maddie about, like, right, like, how's the investigation go? And Maddie's like, I can't talk about it because it's not my case. And Prita's obviously, she's concerned because she's wondering, like, right, this new attack that's happened, is there some connection there or something? And Maddie's like, right, there's a cop that was struck, so we're kind of spread a little thin. And Prita was like, I see, and walks away. I think that's going to be an issue later on. Because either she's going to have an issue because she's going to feel like the police aren't investigating it, taking it seriously like they should, and there might be consequences for that later on. This might be fallout for, like, if Maddie hadn't gotten so close to Prita and done what Vasquez said, was like, do not get close or do not contact her, that she might end up, things might go sideways. Granted, Maddie's still doing her part because she's going to be working with Detective Coleman because she gave her the idea about, right, the neighborhood app, this most recent attack, and it's like, okay, like, if I need someone in the area, like, I can count on you and your partner. She's like, sure, we're all in. So she's trying to help out because she does want to help Prita, and it's like, right, this is a very bad person, let's catch him before he hurts any more people. But I'm curious, how is Prita going to feel like, oh, I thought you were on my side, but I guess not. You're not as like on my side, and I'm worried that this could turn into an issue later on. We'll see if I'm kind of worried over nothing, but I definitely get that inkling and feeling. How that might turn out, like I said, Prita might decide to try and take things into her own hands because she feels like no one's listening to her, no one's giving her updates. It's like, right, I'm gonna have to find answers on my own, and that could easily go sideways with her maybe trying to confront the person and end up maybe hurting her own person, or ends up getting herself killed in the process. We'll see how that, like I said, that's my worst case scenario right now, but we'll see how that plays out. Another element to this episode is Bosch looking further into Dr. Basu's murder. And the guy he questions earlier in the episode, I'm like, it's going to be that guy, isn't it? Just like the way after Bosch finished talking to him, like that look on his face, I was like, he looks a little, I don't know. And also the detective, what was his name? It's something with a G. The detective is talking mad crap to Bosch. It's like, yo, step off my case or I'll have you arrested. And it's like, oh, like Bosch is like, yo, I'd like to see you try. So he's going to be an issue. And Bosch does talk to Bennett later on, and she says, hey, this guy's kind of a glory hound. The fact is, the moment he took down Jeffrey for the murder, he was so excited. So saying that you embarrassed him in not only the media, but in the court, like he's going to be gunning for you, which the fact is he's going out of his way. Because that's what I think is interesting. He claims to still be investigating, but you're looking at Jeffrey and only Jeffrey. And I'm curious, is he coming at that perspective because it's like, oh yeah, Jeffrey, he's on the streets, he's mentally ill, he fit, like he's got to, it's like, but Bosch looking into it deeper, it's like, there's something more to this, because there's a kid who, was walking his dog, he's like, oh yeah, I told the detective, I saw someone in a very specific hoodie, and it's like, yeah, it never came up in court, but the dude's like, yeah, it's not in his police notes, so the guy completely ignored it, so he's got his own narrative about everything. I think it's very similar to that case, Chandler was working with a guy using facial recognition. I think it's going to be a similar thing with a detective. He's just steadfast in his own way and just like he wants to like he's half-assing it, not doing his due diligence, doing his job properly, because once again, you have another suspect because you're like, right, a description of might not have seen their face, but they're wearing a hoodie, but you completely omitted that from your notes because I think he has it out for Jeffrey because I think he's trying to fit some stereotype of like, right, whoever did this must have been someone that was homeless, mentally ill, and Jeffrey fits that bill on all fronts. So he's going to use that as justification to not look further. Like, that's the thing. And even Bosch had asked Bennett, like, did he have any other suspects? And she's like, I don't think so. So it's like, but also, it's like, Harry's Harry. So you're always going to be like, nah, like, Harry might have tiptoed in the gray area, but you're always, like, side with Harry. You're like, yo, he's the good guy in this. So, like, anyone that's against Harry, screw them. It's always your protagonist being in the right, always. That it always kind of goes like, yeah, that guy's not doing his job properly, so. They end up, Harry ends up talking to Dr. Basu's wife and daughter, but it turns out he was meeting with someone about, I forgot what it was exactly, but Harry was like, oh yeah, there was like some kind of meeting or something. He was going to meet with someone. I think it was like someone named Alan it was like, they were investigating something. And Harry was like, oh, do you know about this? And his daughter was like, no, I have no idea what that's about. Like, I didn't know Dad was doing that. So I'm sure that's going to be a main motive into it. It's like, right. And there's like, if you look hard enough, there's like, okay, there's some other threads here that the detective didn't pull. In fact, he actually kind of turns things against Harry, and the detective is telling the mom, like, Dr. Basu's wife, that is like, oh, this detective, he's screwing up and letting the real killer get away, but Harry's like, the DNA evidence proves that Jeffrey isn't the one who killed your husband, so there's definitely something else going on here, so there's that side of things. Harry also continues his investigation into the whole Dominic side of things. He does find out that his place is bugged, and obviously he leaves it there because he wants whoever's got his place bugged to still believe, like, all right, he hasn't found it, we're good, so. Whether they caught on to the fact, he tried to move the desk lamp as quietly as possible, but maybe they still might have found out, like, oh, that noise, he must have found it, he's pretending like he didn't. We'll see whether they're on to him, because he's on to them, but he doesn't know if they know that he knows. The guy that Lewis, who knew Dominic, he knew the place where the older lady that the photographer that Dominic was dating worked at. So Harry went there, did some investigating, and found a photo taken by that journalist. Her name is Gabriella, and so Harry goes to meet with her. Turns out they had like a slight ceremonial marriage. It wasn't anything official, but they were going to make it official the moment he came back from Vietnam. Sadly, that didn't happen. And I thought it was sweet, Harry being like, no, it's not too silly, having like a little bit of getting a bruja to be the one who officiates it. And Harry had talked a little bit, obviously, about his circumstances. I think probably working the Dr. Basu case, because obviously him being homeless for a little while ended up coming up. And I think everything with all this case too, I think that's also why he wanted to do this for Whitney, because it's like, right, he grew up in the foster care system. His mom, on and off would get him, and then obviously she ended up getting murdered. So obviously that never. So that's what makes these cases. I think both the Dr. Basu thing and this whole investigation for Vance, why it's so pertinent to Harry. Interestingly enough, we find out that Vance wasn't only a grandfather, but he was also a great-grandfather as well. Because it turns out that Viviana, Gabriella and Dominic's daughter, the one that they named after his mom, ended up having a daughter of her own, and it's like that child's 14. I think it's a little girl, or was it whatever the case may be. So obviously Harry's keeping everything close to the vest. It's like, right, we'll go see her tomorrow so I can talk about the fact is that Dominic's biological father and everything. So, but we also see that your boy Sloane is there, which some cops who are investigating the Vance situation go to talk to Harry. Harry gives them the BS, like he tells them the truth enough of like, right, Vance hired me because some person from college, he didn't pay them back and he wanted to make amends. It's like, oh, that's pretty late in life. He's like, yeah, that's all he kind of leaves it at. But it's like, right, apparently no one else knew about it but me and Vance. And Sloane, his head of security, came here to see me. So if you're looking into, because he's like, right, he's already talked to his coroner buddy to be like, yo, something's not right. It's still inconsistent on whether it was natural causes or whether the guy was murdered. So it's like, if you're looking into one, look into Sloane, which perfect timing considering the bastard's still following Harry around, even followed him to Gabriella. So that could definitely be an issue. Because Philip showed up and he's talking to Ida. Everyone, interestingly enough, everyone except for Sloane is getting laid off with the mansion staff. So that includes Ida, despite 40 years of service. So her, and she's getting like a severance cut, and she didn't even bother looking at the paycheck. So we'll see what kind of goes on that front. But it's interesting that Sloane, who kind of turns out to be the most disloyal person amongst the staff, he's keeping his job and, becoming a part of like the security team. But everyone else who probably was more loyal to Vance is like, yeah. Because I think either Sloane killed him and it was because Philip wanted him to, and that's how his loyalty is getting paid. We'll see. It's definitely going to be interesting to see. Episode 8 is also out now too, so it's going to be interesting to see what goes down in episode 8, where this all ends up taking us. So, but really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.